From AFC Richmond's deadbeat team that just can't score a win, to Lasso, who's been doing everything but coaching them. Here are all the reasons why Ted Lasso is so disappointing this season. And what's the biggest disappointment in the show than the team itself, AFC Richmond? Now look, sports are crazy. You win, you lose, but you keep learning along the way to get better. Except when it comes to Richmond, which is probably the worst soccer team to exist in the Ted Lasso universe at this point. I mean, even Zava retired shortly after he joined them, and he was supposedly the best player in the entire Premier League. If that's not a sign that this is a falling ship, then what is? And it's not like Richmond doesn't want to win. We all know how many strategies they've gone through, right? But it's as if luck or the team's ability to play a decent game have all gone down the drain. And no matter what they do, or who they bring into the team, they just keep losing. Guys, I'm not superstitious or anything, but isn't that a sign that the show needs to stop? You know, just saying, and let's not forget the coaches. Not Ted, no. I have got a separate rant reserved for him for later. I'm talking about Coach Beard and the ever-grumpy Roy Kent. See, I love these characters, and I've been a fan of Beard since day one. But can these guys please realize that none of them have a single, not even an iota, of strategic thinking left in their brains? I mean, up until season 2, they were at least giving some feedback to the team. Remember when Roy told Jamie to be a prick? And Beard, well, I'll admit he was never much of a talker. But in the previous seasons, he was at least supporting the team with their strategy. What's he doing now? My point is, both the coaches, aside from Ted, are literally just sitting ducks. All they talk about is the 4-4-2, or, you know, some other similar formations that, by the way, aren't working. Oh, and remember when these two geniuses went ahead and showed the team Nate's video? Don't get me wrong, that episode was satisfying, and I loved the shade all players threw at Nate after finding out what he'd done. But you don't have to be a genius to see that this was obviously going to ruin the game, and that too, against West Ham. I mean, honestly guys. Oh, and while we're on the topic of coaches, let's also talk about Roy and Keeley. In seasons 1 and 2, their relationship, well, it made all the difference. It was charming and entertaining, and gave the story some substance to go off with. But ever since they've broken up, thanks to Roy, or should I say, no thanks to him, the whole thing's become even more mundane. Sure, the Keeley and Jack plot is great, and I love seeing her be a boss lady in her own company. But guys, these two were the end game for me, and breaking them up was the worst decision the writers took. Honestly, it feels like the show's experimenting at the very last hour, when it should be wrapping up plots instead, so we can finally get to the team's winning plot. If there is one at all, that is. And speaking of coaches and their relationships, what about Beard and Jane? No one's going to address them? Don't get me wrong, from a comical point of view, I totally dig their self-aware but super codependent relationship. But from a practical point of view, well, can they please break up once and for all? Honestly, if Ted Lasso was real life, I'd totally expect Jane to put up a Reddit post against Beard and be called either a possessive partner or worse things that only a Redditor can imagine. But in this show, the relationship is dubbed as charming, which is so not the truth. Remember that episode when Jane drops Beard's 72 missed calls? 72! That's not the healthiest dynamic in a relationship, is it? Also, when did their relationship grow so much that they're literally inseparable now? That also makes me question the show's speed, which is so slow in some cases, like when addressing Ted's ability to learn about soccer, but so fast-paced in other instances, like the league themselves, half of which passes by without us even knowing. It's like the show's focusing on everything but soccer sometimes, and that's frustrating. Because isn't this show about soccer? Not that I don't want to see what Keeley is up to, or if Rebecca's psychic is correct or not. But guys, the show's real magic lies on the field. Remember all those epic goals from Tart, Obasanya, and Rojas? Remember the team spirit they showed, especially when Roy trained Isaac, and then proceeded to join the team as a coach? Also, all those chants about Jamie, Roy, and even Richmond itself, whether I love the show or not, those were the moments that most people are watching it for. But lately, the entire series has been less about the game and more about toxic positivity. That wasn't the case in the beginning. Back then, the story of a coach all the way from America who didn't know anything about the world he'd shifted to was charming, cute, and quirky. His positivity and the preachings of believe or have a memory of a goldfish were super fun to watch. The fish out of the water trope was refreshing and even gave way to some great character developments. But now that the show's way past its debut, the whole positivity angle is kind of jarring. For one, not every character needs to come over to the right side to be likable. Trent Krim, for example, did he have to join Richmond as a writer? I mean, Lasso's impact wasn't that profound on him, was it? Even though I liked how they connected him to Colin. But still, there are other characters too who, by being with Lasso, have automatically turned into positivity machines, which isn't the point of the show, is it? Like, I know the entire moral lesson here is that you can fight the fight if you believe, or that underdogs can't be underestimated all the time. But add too much positivity to it, and you have yourself a show that takes itself too seriously to work. The same's happening to Ted Lasso. The show's become more about the feel of the game instead of the game itself. It's more about the characters embodying Ted's mannerisms now, instead of taking their own judgment, which takes their uniqueness away too. Which brings me to the show's relationships. Not Roy and Keeley, they were great, but others, like Sam and Rebecca, I mean, did they really have to? For a moment there, I really thought it was Ted talking to her via the dating app, instead of Sam. But when the real couple was finally revealed, it didn't really sit well with me. For one, it's because their age difference was huge. And while that's not all bad considering they're two consenting adults in real life, such relationships can be super exploitative, and so watching them together was okay. There's also Rupert with Bex, which was such a superficial relationship from the beginning that I still can't believe they have a baby together. I mean, Bex, couldn't you see? And finally, of course, Michelle and her marriage counselor. Ex-marriage counselor, actually. How does that relationship not ring a bell in her head? This is where I totally get where Ted's coming from. But did it have to be such a low blow from the writers? His team's already losing, guys. He doesn't need to be an all-out loser either, does he? And now that we're talking about him anyway, let's discuss the final reason why I'm disappointed in Ted Lasso. And the reason is Ted Lasso himself. I don't deny that Jason Sudeikis has done an amazing job in portraying Lasso, but his character can be really frustrating at times, especially when he just won't let his team play as a proper team. It's soccer, guys. It's probably one of the biggest shows in the world, but Ted plays it as a gamble, where he doesn't care if they win or lose, which he isn't even sure why he's coaching. But somehow, he always has a thing or two to say. Remember what I said about toxic positivity? Yup, that's this dude's personality right there. He's also really not trying to learn the game at all. They did get lucky when Nate joined the bunch and became an assistant coach, but just because he isn't there anymore, does it mean Ted's going to drop all reason and be a bad coach instead? You gotta at least try, man. Instead, he's trying everything else but that. First, he took the team to the sewers of all places, which was super pointless, except when Jamie Tart said poopy, which was the best part of the whole thing. And then, in an attempt to implement his total football strategy, he allowed strings to be tied to those parts of his team so that they could play better. I mean, do I even need to continue? So yeah, from Ted Lasso's total inability to coach his team to the team itself that just can't win, these were all the reasons Ted Lasso is such a disappointing show and should be ending already.